Could you open up search book, The Great Paradises of God? The Great Paradises. So, was there dinosaurs in the Ark of Noah? Actually, I read from a handwritten note by Pastor Villalobos about that. I thought there was a direct quote. Anyway, I found the next best thing. Let's read the previous line. God was so satisfied, He rested from all His works at the seventh day, and hallowed He this seventh day Sabbath for Him, because God looked it all over after He had been 6,000 years in molding it, fixing it out, making it come into existence, and put the mountains up and make the volcanics push the mountains up, and the things that had taken place in the eruptions dried off, fixed it the way He had it, and it was a beautiful place. There was nothing like it, the great paradises of God and the great dinosaurs. What time would that be? Human era of time? Or before the human era of time? Prehistoric time? And whatever more, crawling through it, and the great animals, no harm in them. They were just as gentle as little kittens. They had nothing at all, no sickness, no sorrow, not one disease germ on the earth. Oh, what a place. The great birds swinging from tree to tree, and Adam could call them by name, and they would fly up on his shoulders and coo to him, and oh, what a wonderful place God had. Satan's Eden, of course, Satan's Eden could apply to a prehistoric time for the time of man. But even in the time of man, the Eden there, that was the garden there that was made by God, it could become Satan's Eden if the Word of God was forgotten. Just like if we receive material blessings, we had all these things good, but we forget about God. Satan's deception is there. Now, our subject is about dinosaurs. What kind of dinosaurs was there in the time of Adam? Well, we're not going to speculate how big they are. But for sure, if they are smaller, they're still called dinosaurs by the prophet. I'm going to show you something why. Later, I'm going to talk about the 7,000 years, how the prophet talked about the development of man until there was a missing link. Let's open to Genesis chapter 1. Well, you all know Genesis chapter 2. God planted the garden eastward in Eden. And there was the man, then he brought meat for the animals, then his wife, would-be wife. The fall is in chapter 3. Now this is my question. Where in chapter 1 was the fall of angels? When did they fall? Did they fall after the time of man in Genesis chapter 6? How others would put it? Or they fell much, much earlier in time?
1:1.
We're talking of Satan's Eden also.
1:2.
In Genesis chapter 1, you score that. Look at your Bibles. What point in time did the angels fall?
1:2.
What day? So here comes a mystery. It also involves a dispute between traditionalists whether the world is just 6,000 years old or billions of years old. Now, before the time of man, this earth was inhabited by angels. In Ezekiel chapter 28, there was the king of Tyre, and God used that allegory, the king of Tyre, and pushed it back in the past, in the time of Lucifer. The king of Tyre was alluded to Lucifer. Of course, the king of Tyre was so proud, he thought Alexander the Great could not be able to conquer him. He had an island fortress. Eventually, Alexander the Great was able to destroy him. Now, Lucifer had that same spirit before he fell. In Ezekiel 28, let's open Ezekiel 28 for a moment. This is the original Eden before he became Satan. And here, a description of the devil. He had everything. A garden of stones. Later we're going to go back in Genesis chapter 1. What period in time. And now, later, we're going to talk about how the animals fit in. Ezekiel 28. Now let's jump to Lucifer. Maybe in verse 10. Verse 13. Wait, let's go back to verse 12. Let's start from verse 12. Here, the description to the king of Tyre eventually will be pushed back to the time of Lucifer. Some will take a lamentation upon the king of Tyre and say, unto him, thus saith the Lord God, thou sealest up the sun full of wisdom, perfect in beauty. He was originally created perfect in beauty. Thou hast been in Eden, the garden of God. Every precious stone was thy covering. Sardius, topaz, the diamond, the beryl, onyx, jasper, sapphire, emerald, carbuncle, gold, workmanship of thy tabrets and thy pipes was prepared in thee that thou was created. He was a song leader, the angelic being, before the time of man, even before the creation of the earth. These angels were the sons of God, singing praises to Him, Job 38. Singing praises to Him while He was creating the earth. And there could be an explanation that these sons of God in Job 38 foreshadow the bride in the future when the new heavens and new earth will be created. Now, the song leader in the time past was Lucifer. He had the tabrets prepared in him the day he was created. Thou art the anointed cherub that covereth. I have set thee so. Thou wast upon the holy mountain of God. And what is that holy mountain? The same geographical spot eventually where man will be created. Zion. Thou hast walked up and down in the midst of the stones of fire. Thou wast perfect in thy ways from the day that thou wast created, till iniquity was found in thee. So what happened in the old dispensational earth? The angels was tested before the time of man. And this fall of angels would be repeated in the fall of man. Now, let's go back to Genesis. What part of Genesis chapter 1 did this take place? Genesis chapter 1.
1:1 and 1:2.
So the 7,000 years, I'll call this the human creation week. This is the time of man. It's from the time of Adam to the millennium. But before this time, in eons past, this was the description. In the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth. The heaven involves the angels, the angelic host, the heavenly realm. Then He went about to create the earth. When He went about to create the earth, everything was good. Everything was perfect. In verse 2, suddenly, the earth was without form and void, and darkness was upon the face of the deep, and the Spirit of God moved upon the face of the waters. Something happened to the earth, a cataclysm, wherein the earth was judged, the earth was cursed. The same description you read in Isaiah 24 about the tribulation, the curse that will happen to the earth, it all happened in time past. It was mentioned in 2 Peter also. That you can find it in rocks. Now, Brother Branham mentioned 2,000 years each, and something happened in each every 2,000 years. Now, if he's going to allude from the time of Adam until millennium is that period of time, let's use the allusion he gave in Genesis chapter 1. What was created in the first day? Light. What was in the second day? Could you help me out there? Light. The next day is firmament. The prophet mentioned about the flood. And when you read about the firmament, there is water. Verse 7, God made the firmament and divided the waters which are under the firmament from the waters which are above the firmament. It was so. You read Genesis chapter 1 in a different light already. We read it in a different light in a sense that you don't think of the earth being brought out from the stage of confusion for preparation for Adam. You read it as a timeline of man until in these 7,000 years. In the time of Noah, the earth was flooded. When the earth was flooded, the waters did not just come from the clouds, it came from the deep. That's a perfect description. Let's go to the third day. What was made under the third day? The third day, the lands appeared. Vegetation appeared. Lands and vegetation. That's the time when the flood receded and the earth was repopulated and all green grass grew back on the earth. Now, on the third day, when those things are being done, it perfectly fits in the chronology after Noah. The first 1,000 years was before the flood. The second 1,000 years was the time of Noah, Genesis chapter 6. The third 1,000 year, the repopulation of the earth. The fourth 1,000th year, this is almost the time of Christ. And what do we have there? The fourth day. The fourth day we have the two greater lights, daytime and nighttime. And there is also the sun, moon, and stars. The firmament in heaven, that's the stars to give light. Stars and moon give light. Now, the Bible says they were for seasons. And what does that represent? The seasons represent the giving of the law. Because the law was transfixed between spring and fall. Of course, beyond that, that will be additional feasts of the Jews. But the original feasts given to Moses was between these two. So the seasons were at the time of the giving of the law. At the time, after the time of the giving of the law, that's the time of the advent of Christ. And the next 2,000 years, that's the church ages. And in there, that's the 5th day and the 6th day. And you will notice something. The animals were created alongside man. Man was on the 6th day. But before the 6th day, the 5th day, there were the animals. But animals did not stop there in the 5th day. It continued up to the 6th day. Let's read the 5th and the 6th day. Let's continue on. And there is God created great whales, every living creature that moveth, which the waters float abundantly, every winged fowl, this kind of, so it was good. God bless them, be fruitful, multiply, fill the earth. The evening and morning were the 5th day. Now, at the end of the 5th day, God said, let the earth bring forth living creature, a beast, cattle, kind, creeping thing. And God made the beast of the earth after his kind, those are the animals on the 5th day. Now, notice before the 6th day, just at the end of the 5th day, God said, let us make man in our image, after our likeness, and let them have dominion over fish of the sea, or over the fowl of the air, over the cattle, over all the earth, and every creeping thing that creepeth upon the earth. Now, if this fell on this time, the church age, who would God be talking to? The Oneness Pentecostals have two versions of Genesis 1:26. One explained the us as angels, the other explained it as Jesus Christ. God was talking to Jesus Christ. Now, if you could place it in the right time table, I believe in the time of Adam, before eons past, it is angels, and angels could type also spiritually the bride in the future. But if you look at this timetable, and the prophet mentioned about this, it was Jesus Christ whom God was talking to here in the church age. Let us make man in our image. And what does the Bible say? We are to be conformed to the image of His beloved Son. He is the firstborn of many brethren in the image of God. So here, the mediatorial work of Christ was in the middle of these 2 days. Let us make man in our image. And so when God made man in His own image, male and female made He made them. Male and female made He them. That man was Jesus Christ, and within Christ was the bride. Within that man was male and female. That male was Adam, but within Adam was Eve, coming from her bosom, coming from the blood that spouted out from his side. So this is what I'm saying as a parallel application when the prophet mentioned about this. Later we're going to talk about dinosaurs, we're going to talk about the animals. Now take note, here in the 6th day, the animals are still being created. Please continue. Let's skip the creation of man. I have given you every herb bearing seed which is upon the face of the earth, every tree which the fruit of the tree yielding shall be from every piece of the earth, and every fowl of the earth, to every tree that creepeth up, there is life. I have given every green herb for meat. It was so. And God saw everything that He had made, and it was very good. And the evening and morning were the 6th day. Now you notice there it was dominion given to man for the animals. And why is it that the creation of man coincides with the creation of the animals? In the church ages, it was the beast that was the cause of the fall, the serpent. And aside from the serpent, there were examples in the Bible of the beasts for the development of man.
4 living creatures.
The 4 living creatures is part of God's way of redeeming man back, getting the characteristics of the eagle, the cow, the lion, but there's also the characteristics of the enemy. These two are tugging each other. Okay? Now, at the end of the 6th day, at the end of this 6,000th year, the bride would have come out, and man would be created in the image of God. And to summarize it, let them have dominion over the earth, the fish of the sea, the fowl of the air. That's the millennium, wherein all creation will have ended. Now let's focus on the animals. Was there dinosaurs in the ark? What about the development of man? Did God use the animals for development of man? Evolutionists today of course they don't know God. They don't accept there is God. They couldn't understand how God, the plan of God. They just had their own understanding. They could only see what is happening scientifically. Now, let me quote another. Could you open a message quote here? Prehistoric giant.
Prehistoric giant.
Prehistoric giant. Well, Brother Branham was describing a serpent. There were lots of quotes about it. I'm going to focus only on this.
Leviathan.
Leviathan? No. He's talking about the serpent. Although there are many giants in the prehistoric age. Before the time of Adam, there were dinosaurs, there were the animal kingdom that were destroyed. That's why the prophet talked about bones being dug up. And these animals that were destroyed, these belong to eons past. But if you see animals today, these animals today that you see are just part of the descendants of that same animal in the past. There are some prehistoric living fossils today, but there are those that are extinct. But actually what I was saying, extinct are the giant-sized animals. Prehistoric giant, you can cross. Could you include this in the search? You can cross animals. You can cross animals.
You can crossbreed.
Okay, let's read the previous line, paragraph up there. Okay, there's Lucifer, chimpanzee. Okay, he's describing the serpent. He's a great big fellow. The serpent devil, Lucifer, knew that was the only blood that would mix with this human blood. The only person he couldn't deal with the chimpanzee. Let me tell you something. During the fall of the angels, it's just what he repeated in the time of man. During the fall of the angels, there was anarchy in the animal kingdom, and there was also this mixture of the blood, crossbreeding of these species. The only person he couldn't deal with the chimpanzee. The blood wouldn't mix. He deal with different things. He couldn't deal with the sheep. He couldn't deal with the horse. He couldn't deal with the animal. He had to deal with this serpent. The serpent was the most closest animal next to man. But man without the image of God, what is that man? The Bible describes him also as beast. Until man will be made in the image of God. Let's take now and see what he looks like. Great big fellow, prehistoric giant. He was describing the serpent. The serpent. Before he was already a serpent. He looked like a man, but he's not a man in the sense like Adam was. That's where they find those big bones. I'll show you this in the Bible. Now, quite closely. Alright. This great big fellow, let's say he was 10 foot tall, great big shoulders, just looked like a man, and his blood after coming down coinciding one animal to another. You can cross animals, they kept getting higher blood, higher form of life, higher form till it climbs up to the man realm. He's going to talk about the missing link. From the creeping animal going up to the higher form of animals, there is a steady progression, just like a progressive revolution. There's a steady progression in the development before the fullness of the image of God in man. Now, here, and before it reached man, there is this missing link. Now, it disappeared. He was talking about how scientists did not find the missing link, and it was the serpent that was cursed to become a serpent, a snake, that disappeared. But the statement of the prophet, being like a prehistoric man or actual prehistoric giant and dinosaurs in the ark, there is a continuation of this process of going into higher form. So the dinosaurs in the ark were actually the same animals that Noah brought in. Whether there be extinct animals extinct today that was brought in the ark, doesn't matter. What the point here is, there's no another creation of animals. Here he is, the serpent. There was a great big fellow, the devil comes, and he says, I can inspire. Now, did the devil inspire the animals, the old animals in the prehistoric world to die, to have chaos? Yes, there was. There was that event. And that event, I didn't quote everything here. Somewhere in Jeremiah, there is a quote of the eons past, before the time of man. And it's just a repetition of history. That's why, wherein come wars among you, James chapter 4, for man. Because man would be, like what the devil would do, is made into the image of beasts that he could inspire. Now, let's talk about the animals. In Genesis chapter 1, which came first, the animal or man? Could anyone say? Animals or man? Which came first?
Animals.
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 Now, did you know in chapter 2, the first creation was man? The animals were later formed and brought to him. Now, from between Genesis chapter 1 and Genesis chapter, there is a summary of what took place. Moses, as being inspired by God, was focusing on the first family and the fall. So, the essence of this is, the same animals that was in the prehistoric world was also in the ark, that was also in the time of Adam. And why? Because animals will play an integral part for man's redemption. Because you look at the book of Revelation, even other books before that, you see many animals being used for sacrifice, being alluded to sin, and many others. And that's why they were given in the law, and they were given for our redemption as a type. So this is, now why were animals brought in the ark? This is also part that supported Noah, a part that would repopulate the earth, but it would set a deeper type. Genesis chapter 3 verse 1. The serpent was more subtle than any beast of the field which the Lord God had made. It represented spiritually those that is closest to man is the very ones that would tempt man. Now we have churches imagine these different beasts of the field as the different denominations. Those closest to the message are those that the devil will tempt to play the wicked servant, to smite the faithful servant, to tempt the man of God. And Christ was smitten on the heel, but of course he smote the head of the serpent. And that's a perfect type. And God used that type. So, for the serpent. Okay, so that's a short insight I'd like to give. God bless you.
Thank you, brother. This time I would like to